"Sir, I need you to step aside. We have reason to believe that the employee is in this country illegally." But before we continue with this absolutely insane story, let me ask you something. Where are you watching this from right now? Drop your city or country in the comments below. I want to know where you're tuning in from. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button on your screen right now. Stories like this need to be heard, and trust me, you're not going to want to miss a single second of what happens next. This is one of those stories that seems like pure fiction, but every moment was captured on camera. So go ahead, subscribe, and let's dive in. It was a regular Thursday at Greenfield Supermarket, a family-owned grocery store in suburban Atlanta, when two agents walked through the front door and headed straight to register number 3. They had a target, a 24-year-old black female cashier named Cashier Williams, who was in the middle of ringing up an elderly lady's groceries. The agents didn't wait for her to finish. They didn't ask the manager for permission. They simply positioned themselves in front of the register and started asking citizenship questions in front of a store full of customers. What these agents didn't know was that the supermarket owner, Michael Chen, was watching everything on security cameras from his office. And what happened in the next 15 minutes would be captured on crystal clear video, spread across the internet, and end with the agents losing their jobs and Cashier winning a federal lawsuit that would change the entire agency's policies. Who was Cashier Williams? Cashier Williams was a college student working part-time at Greenfield for 2 years. She was studying nursing at Georgia State University, dreaming of following in her grandmother's footsteps, a nurse for 35 years. Cashier was the kind of employee every manager loves: punctual, polite, efficient. She had perfect evaluations, had never missed a shift, and regular customers specifically asked to be served by her at the register. She was born in Atlanta, grew up 10 minutes from the supermarket, and was as American as anyone in that store. But to someone with racial prejudices, her skin tone was enough to assume she didn't belong. The confrontation begins. On that Thursday, Cashier was wearing her standard green supermarket uniform, her name badge clearly visible, helping Mrs. Patterson, a 78-year-old regular customer who shopped there every week. Cashier was smiling, chatting about the weather, scanning items, everything completely normal. Then, two men wearing tactical vests with ICE letters stamped on them approached the register. One of them, who would later be identified as Agent Derek Thompson, placed his hand on the conveyor belt and said Cashier needed to stop what she was doing and answer some questions. Cashier looked at him, confused. She was clearly in the middle of serving a customer. She politely said she would finish with Mrs. Patterson first and then could help them. Thompson didn't accept that. He raised his voice, saying she needed to cooperate immediately. He asked where she was born. Cashier, now visibly scared and confused, said Atlanta. He asked if she had documents proving it. She said she didn't walk around with her birth certificate at work. The second agent, Marcus Rivera, asked if she had a green card or immigration documentation. Cashier responded, "I don't need it because I'm an American citizen." Thompson didn't believe her. He said she'd fit the profile of someone who could be illegally in the country and that they had the right to verify. Mrs. Patterson steps in. Mrs. Patterson, the elderly customer, was stunned. She had known Cashier for 2 years. She knew Cashier was in college. She asked the agents what the hell they thought they were doing, harassing a young woman at work. The entire store was stopping to watch. Other customers in adjacent lines started pulling out their phones. Floor managers were running to see what was happening. And in the second-floor office, Michael Chen, the 52-year-old supermarket owner, saw everything on security screens. He didn't hesitate for a second. He dropped what he was doing and ran down the stairs. Michael Chen takes a stand. Michael was an immigrant himself. He had come from China with his parents when he was 8. He had built this supermarket from scratch over 20 years of brutal work. And one of the things he was most proud of was how he treated his employees like family. Cashier wasn't just an employee to him. She was practically a niece. He knew her mother, knew her grandmother, had given her flexible hours so she could study. Seeing federal agents intimidating her in his establishment made his blood boil. Michael crossed the store floor in long, determined strides. His expression transformed from friendly supermarket owner to someone absolutely furious. The security cameras captured everything. He arrived at register number 3 and immediately positioned himself between Cashier and the ICE agents. His first question was direct and cutting. "Who are you and what are you doing intimidating my employee?" Thompson showed his badge and said they were conducting a routine immigration status check. Michael asked if they had a warrant. The answer was no. Michael then asked if they had any specific reason to believe Cashier was illegally in the country. Thompson hesitated before responding that she fit certain demographic criteria that justified investigation. Michael exploded. He asked, loud enough for half the store to hear, what demographic criteria exactly justified harassing a young black woman born in Atlanta while she worked. Thompson tried to say it wasn't about race, it was about law enforcement. Michael didn't let that pass. He pointed to the other registers, all white employees, and asked why the agents weren't checking their documentation, too. Why only Cashier? Why only the young black woman? Thompson had no answer for that. The lawyer gets involved. Rivera, the second agent, tried to change tactics, saying they just needed a few minutes to verify basic information, and then they'd leave. Michael said they wouldn't get another second with Cashier without a court order. The situation was escalating rapidly. Other employees had stopped working completely. Customers were recording everything on their phones. Mrs. Patterson was still standing next to the register, her purse in one hand and her cell phone in the other, filming the agents. She said out loud that they should be ashamed, that Cashier was a good girl who worked and studied, and that this was pure, blatant racism. Thompson made his next fatal mistake. He told Mrs. Patterson to stay out of it or she too would be investigated for obstruction. A 78-year-old lady being threatened by a federal agent. The cameras captured her shocked expression, and that moment would become one of the most shared parts of the viral video that would come later. Michael pulled out his phone and called his lawyer on speakerphone. The lawyer, David Goldstein, specialized in labor rights and had 40 years of experience. He could be clearly heard asking what was happening. Michael explained the situation. Goldstein immediately told the agents they were violating multiple laws by conducting interrogations on private property without a warrant or property owner consent. He said if they didn't leave immediately, he would file actions against them personally and against ICE as an agency. Thompson argued they had federal authority that superseded state laws. Goldstein laughed and said, federal authority doesn't include the right to invade private property and harass American citizens without probable cause. Cashier's trauma. While this was happening, Cashier was trembling behind Michael, tears streaming down her face. She had never felt so humiliated, so vulnerable, so attacked in her life. She had done everything right, worked hard, studied hard, followed all the rules, and yet she was being treated like a criminal in front of dozens of people, in front of customers she served every day. A co-worker, Jessica, also a cashier, came and put her arm around Cashier, saying everything would be okay. But in that moment, it didn't feel like it would be okay. It felt like the world was falling apart. It felt like no matter how hard you worked or how good a person you were, your skin would still determine how you were treated. The agent's fatal mistake. Thompson and Rivera exchanged glances. They were clearly realizing the situation had gotten out of control. There were at least 15 people recording on phones. The establishment owner had a lawyer on the phone. An elderly customer was calling them racists. And the young woman they had come to interrogate was visibly traumatized, which wasn't a good look. Rivera whispered something to Thompson. The security cameras captured the exact moment where Thompson realized they had made a huge mistake. But instead of backing down gracefully, instead of apologizing and leaving, he doubled down once more. He told Michael that interfering with federal agents was a crime and that Michael could be arrested. Michael didn't back down an inch. In fact, he stepped forward, invading the agent's personal space, and said something that would be quoted in dozens of news articles in the following weeks. Go ahead. Arrest me. Arrest an American citizen, owner of a legitimate business, for protecting his employee from illegal harassment. Let's see how that works out for you when videos from 15 witnesses hit the news tonight. The absolute confidence in Michael's voice, combined with the complete lack of fear, made Thompson hesitate. You could see on the security cameras the exact moment where the agent realized he had completely lost control of the situation. A journalist steps forward. Goldstein, the lawyer still on the phone, took advantage of this moment to make something very clear. He said he was already drafting a formal complaint against both agents and that every additional second they remained on that property was being added to the list of violations. That's when the situation took a turn nobody expected. One of the customers who was recording, a woman named Patricia Miller, who was an investigative reporter for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, identified herself. She said out loud that she was a journalist, that she was documenting everything, and that she wanted official statements from the agents about why they had chosen to specifically interrogate a black employee without any probable cause. Thompson went pale. Rivera actually took a step back. Having a journalist from a major newspaper actively documenting their mistake transformed this from an embarrassing incident into a public relations disaster that could end their careers. Patricia started asking specific questions. How many other people had they approached in that store? Why specifically Cashier? Did they have any concrete evidence of immigration violation, or were they operating purely based on racial profiling? Thompson tried to end the conversation, saying he couldn't comment on an ongoing investigation. Michael immediately pointed out the hypocrisy. How could it be an ongoing investigation if they claimed to be just doing routine checks? Which was it, a serious investigation or random harassment? Thompson couldn't respond coherently. His answers were getting increasingly confused, more defensive. Can you imagine how bad this looked? A federal agent, supposedly trained, being completely dismantled by a supermarket owner and a journalist, all while a young cashier cried silently behind them. The optics were terrible, and the cameras captured every second of his humiliation. Let me ask you something if you're watching. Have you ever witnessed something like this happening right in front of you? Racism so blatant you couldn't believe what you were seeing? Type yes in the comments if so. A community stands together. Other supermarket employees started gathering around. The assistant manager, a Hispanic man named Carlos Rodriguez, came and stood beside Michael. 2 stock clerks, both young black men, came and stood near Cashier in solidarity. The message was clear: this wasn't just an attack on Cashier. It was an attack on every employee of color in that store. It was an attack on the dignity of everyone who worked there. And they weren't going to stay silent while it happened. Carlos, who had worked at the supermarket for 12 years and had known Cashier since she was a teenager, spoke directly to the agents. He said Cashier was one of the best people he knew, that she was more American than most people he met, and that what they were doing was disgusting and wrong. Rivera finally seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. He touched Thompson's arm and suggested they leave and continue the verification through appropriate channels. But Thompson was too ego-bruised to back down now. He had been publicly challenged, had been recorded looking incompetent, and his pride wouldn't allow him to just walk away. He said Cashier still needed to provide documentation proving her citizenship or she could face detention. That was the last straw for Michael. He took the phone back and told Goldstein to file all possible actions immediately. He then told the agents that either they left voluntarily in the next 30 seconds or he would call Atlanta police to remove them for trespassing. The irony of calling police to remove federal agents wasn't lost on anyone. Mrs. Patterson, the elderly customer who had started all this by filming, shouted something that would become one of the most shared quotes from the viral video. "I grew up during the civil rights movement. I've seen this kind of intimidation before, and I thought the country had progressed beyond that. Seeing a young woman being terrorized simply for existing while black made me realize we haven't progressed that far." Her words hit everyone in the store. You could see people shaking their heads, some crying, others visibly angry. The supermarket had transformed from a place of mundane business into a stage where decades of racial injustice were being exposed in real time. And all because 2 federal agents decided that a young black woman doing her job looked too suspicious to be left alone. The agents leave, but the damage is done. The agents finally left the supermarket 12 minutes after they had entered, but the damage was already done. Kesha was visibly shaken, trembling as Jessica and Carlos led her to the back office away from customers' stares. Michael immediately closed register number 3 and put up a sign saying it was temporarily out of service. He apologized to customers for the disruption and offered 10% discounts on their purchases as compensation for the inconvenience. But nobody was thinking about discounts. People were thinking about what they had just witnessed. Patricia Miller, the journalist, remained and asked to speak with Michael and Kesha when she was ready. She said this story needed to be told, that the public needed to know how federal agents were operating. Michael agreed completely, but said he first needed to take care of Kesha and make sure she was okay. Kesha's aftermath. In the back office, Kesha was sitting in a chair, still crying, still processing the trauma of what had just happened. Her mother, Denise Williams, had been called and was on her way. Michael brought water, tissues, and most importantly, his comforting presence. He told Kesha she had done nothing wrong, that what happened wasn't her fault, and that he would do everything in his power to ensure those agents faced consequences. Kesha managed to speak between sobs, asking why this had happened to her. Why her? What did she do besides exist? Michael had no good answers to those questions because there were no good answers. The truth was she was targeted purely because of her race, and admitting that out loud only made the injustice more painful. Carla stayed with Kesha while Michael returned to the store floor. Customers were still talking about the incident in small groups. Several approached Michael to express support and outrage. One man said he would never shop at a store where employees could be harassed like that, but then realized Michael had defended Kesha and corrected himself, saying he would always shop there specifically because Michael had taken a stand. A woman asked if there was anything customers could do to help. Michael said the best thing they could do was share their own recordings and tell people what they saw. Testimony was power. The more people knew what really happened, the harder it would be for ICE to sweep this under the rug. The story goes viral. Patricia Miller started working immediately. She interviewed witnesses, collected contact information, and reviewed the multiple video recordings from customers. Every angle told the same story: ICE agents entering private property without a warrant, specifically targeting a black employee without probable cause, threatening customers who tried to defend her, and refusing to leave even when the owner and his lawyer made it clear they were violating the law. Patricia was already mentally writing the article that would be published the next morning. This would be huge. She knew it. It would touch on all the hot topics the country was facing: immigration, racial profiling, federal overreach, and private property rights, and she had it all documented on video from multiple sources. When Kesha's mother arrived, the situation became even more emotional. Denise Williams rushed into the office and hugged her daughter, both crying. Denise was furious and terrified at the same time. Furious that her daughter had been treated like this. Terrified thinking about what could have happened if Michael hadn't been there. If the agents had managed to take Kesha. If she had been detained for no reason. The stories of people being detained by ICE and disappearing into the system for days or weeks were all too real. Denise knew her daughter had done everything right in life. But she also knew that didn't matter when you were black in America. You could still be targeted, still be treated as suspicious, still have your humanity questioned. The legal strategy. Michael gave time for mother and daughter to have their private moment, then came back with Goldstein still on the phone. The lawyer was already compiling a legal strategy. They would sue the agents individually for harassment and civil rights violations. They would sue ICE as an agency for allowing this type of behavior to continue without adequate supervision. And they would file complaints with every relevant oversight body, from the Department of Justice to the Inspector General's office. Goldstein also suggested something else. He said they should make this public as quickly as possible, not just through traditional media, but through social media, too. The more eyes on the case, the harder it would be for authorities to ignore or minimize. Michael agreed completely. He had the supermarket security footage in high definition, capturing every angle of the incident. He would make it available to any media outlet that wanted to use it. The media explosion. Patricia Miller's article was published on the front page of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution the next morning with the headline, "ICE Agents Harass American Citizen Cashier at Atlanta Supermarket." The article included witness quotes, excerpts from video recordings, and a devastating legal analysis of how the agents had violated multiple federal and state laws. But what really made the story explode were the videos. Michael had sent the supermarket security footage to 5 different media outlets, and all of them published simultaneously. Customers who had filmed on their phones also started posting on social media. Within 6 hours, the video was viral. Within 12 hours, it had millions of views. Within 24 hours, it was being discussed on national news programs, commented on by politicians, and shared by celebrities who wanted to express their outrage. What made the videos so powerful was how they completely destroyed any narrative ICE might try to create. There was no ambiguity. You could clearly see Cashier doing her job peacefully. You could see the agents approaching her unprovoked. You could hear them demanding documentation without legal cause. You could see Michael defending her. You could hear Mrs. Patterson calling their behavior what it was, racism. And you could see Thompson threatening a 78-year-old lady for daring to film. Every frame of the video told the same unquestionable story: abuse of power motivated by racial prejudice. There was no way for ICE to spin this. They tried anyway. ICE tries to spin the story. The ICE spokesperson issued a statement saying they were investigating the incident and that they took all complaints seriously, but the public wasn't interested in generic PR statements. People wanted real accountability. Civil rights organizations started speaking out. The ACLU issued a statement condemning the agent's actions and offering free legal representation to Cashier. The NAACP organized a protest in front of the ICE regional office in Atlanta. Hundreds of people showed up holding signs with Cashier's photo and phrases like "working while black is not a crime" and "ICE is out of control." Local politicians started making statements. Atlanta's mayor said he was deeply disturbed by the incident and that the city would not tolerate racial harassment from federal agents within its borders. 2 state congressmen called for a hearing on ICE enforcement practices in Georgia. Thompson and Rivera were immediately placed on administrative leave while an internal investigation was conducted. But this time, unlike so many other cases where internal investigations protect officers, there was too much public pressure to make this go away. The videos had been seen by millions. The story was everywhere. The Department of Homeland Security Inspector General's office announced it would conduct its own independent investigation. This was rare and significant. It meant that even within the federal government, people were recognizing this had crossed a line that couldn't be ignored. The lawsuit. Goldstein used this moment to accelerate the legal strategy. He filed the federal lawsuit on Cashier's behalf 3 days after the incident, seeking compensatory and punitive damages as well as system-wide policy changes. The lawsuit was comprehensive and devastating in its details. It not only outlined what happened that day at the supermarket, but placed it in the context of a broader pattern of problematic ICE behavior. Goldstein had done his research. He discovered Thompson had 4 previous complaints in his personnel file for aggressive conduct during investigations, all involving people of color, and none had resulted in serious discipline. He discovered Rivera had failed racial sensitivity training twice, but was allowed to remain on active duty anyway. He discovered the Atlanta ICE office had received 27 complaints in the past 2 years about racial profiling, and only 3 had been properly investigated. The lawsuit argued this wasn't just about 2 bad agents. It was about an institutional culture that allowed and even encouraged this type of behavior. Cashier speaks out. Cashier participated in her first televised interview 1 week after the incident. She was visibly nervous but determined to tell her story in her own words. She talked about how she felt that day, about the terror of having federal agents demanding she prove she belonged in the country where she was born. She talked about the humiliation of being targeted in front of customers and co-workers. She talked about how she was still having nightmares, waking up scared, thinking someone was coming for her. And she talked about why she was suing. "It's not for the money. It's because I know if I don't fight, this will keep happening. It will happen to other cashiers, other students, other people who are just trying to live their lives. Her interview was watched by millions and generated another wave of public support. The settlement. Kesha Williams' lawsuit against Thompson, Rivera, and ICE took 18 months to resolve, but when it finally reached settlement, it was an overwhelming victory. The settlement included $2.3 million in financial compensation for Kesha. But as she had said from the beginning, money was never the main point. The settlement also required comprehensive policy changes throughout the Department of Homeland Security. Every ICE agent would be required to complete 80 hours of intensive training on constitutional rights, racial profiling, and proper conduct on private property. Any agent entering private property without a warrant or probable cause would face automatic suspension and possible dismissal. ICE would be required to create a public tracking system for complaints against agents, allowing patterns of misconduct to be identified before they ruined more lives. What happened to the agents? Thompson and Rivera never worked in law enforcement again. Thompson was formally fired after the Inspector General's investigation concluded he had violated multiple agency policies and federal laws. His name became permanently associated with the viral video showing his abuse of power. He tried to appeal the dismissal through the federal union, but even the union couldn't defend him against such clear video evidence. Rivera received a 6-month suspension without pay and was demoted, but ended up resigning 3 months later, unable to deal with the public shame and hostility from colleagues who blamed him for bringing negative scrutiny to the entire agency. Some people argued they were being treated too harshly, that one mistake shouldn't define entire careers. But Kesha publicly disagreed. It wasn't a mistake. It was a conscious choice to harass someone based on their appearance. Michael Chen becomes a hero. Michael became a heroic figure in the Atlanta community and beyond. His supermarket saw a 40% increase in sales in the months following the incident, with people driving from all over the metro area specifically to support a business that had taken a stand for justice. He received awards from civil rights organizations, was invited to speak at conferences on workers' rights, and became a vocal advocate for immigration reform. But when asked about being called a hero, Michael always deflected credit back to Kesha. She was the brave one for transforming her trauma into action, for refusing to let the incident be buried and forgotten. I just did what any decent employer would do, protect my employees from injustice. The fact that this was considered exceptional says more about how low the bar is than about my own character. Kesha's new life. Kesha used part of her settlement to finish nursing school without student debt. She graduated with honors and now works as a registered nurse at an Atlanta hospital, specializing in care for underserved communities. She also created a foundation using the rest of her settlement money to provide free legal assistance to workers facing discrimination or harassment from authorities. The Kesha Williams Foundation has already helped 89 people in its first 3 years, from agricultural workers to retail clerks who were racially profiled. She says, "If something positive had to come out of the worst day of my life, it would be ensuring others had resources to fight back when treated unfairly." In interviews, Kesha is honest about how the incident changed her. There's an innocence you lose when you realize that doing everything right still doesn't protect you from being targeted because of your skin. The legacy of the video. The videos of the supermarket incident still circulate online, having accumulated over 50 million combined views across various platforms. They're used in law enforcement training programs across the country as an example of what not to do. Law schools in classes on civil rights and the Fourth Amendment. Community activism groups to educate people about their rights when confronted by federal agents. The video became a powerful educational tool precisely because it's so unequivocal, showing both the abuse and the appropriate resistance to that abuse. Mrs. Patterson's perspective. Mrs. Patterson, the elderly customer who filmed the original confrontation on her phone, has been interviewed several times about why she decided to record. She always says the same thing. "In my youth during the civil rights movement, so many incidents of racism happened without documentation, without proof, making it easy for authorities to deny. Modern technology finally gave victims the tools to capture the truth." The real lesson. So, what's the real lesson here? It's not just about a cashier being harassed or a supermarket owner taking a stand. It's about how racism manifests in 2024, not always with white hoods and burning crosses, but with federal agents weaponizing government authority against people of color. It's about how power systems can be abused when there's no adequate oversight or accountability. It's about how ordinary witnesses becoming active can change outcomes, how an elderly lady filming on her phone can be as powerful as any lawyer. And it's about a young woman who was just trying to earn money for college, but ended up becoming a symbol of why we have to keep fighting against injustice, even when we're tired, even when it seems like nothing changes. Where they are now. Kesha still shops at Greenfield Supermarket when she can. Michael always gives her a hug when he sees her. And register number 3, where it all happened, has a small sign Michael put up. It doesn't say what happened there, just a simple phrase. Dignity is non-negotiable. Sometimes justice really prevails. And when it prevails, it should be celebrated, documented, and used as a blueprint to ensure it keeps prevailing. Now tell me, have you ever witnessed something like this? Drop a comment below. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Stories like this need to be told.